This is an iHeart podcast.
What if you could decide what happens next in Lively Lewis stories? Now you can, because we're on Rifio. Rifio is the first interactive storytelling platform where you create the next season. Choose your favorite characters, pick the setting, and select the adventure. Then, at the end of each 2-minute episode, you choose how the story continues. No writing, no stress. Just pick, play, and create with us. Search Lively Lewis Stories on Rifio and start your adventure today. Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right. We're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go! I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
Hey friends, welcome back to part 2 of The Photo of the Fairy Garden, the story that was inspired by Virginia. All right, let's jump in. Blossom and Cedar both looked a bit upset and embarrassed because the spell they chose was the reason their fairy garden was in trouble. Wow, a hurricane is definitely not a gentle windstorm for a flying kite, said Ivy. But how bad could it have been? The garden looks lovely. But as Ivy said that, a rumbling noise could be heard. Then a pop. What was that? Asked Virginia. Oh no, it's happening already, called out Cedar and Blossom. What's happening? Asked Levi. Just watch, said Cedar as she pointed to the part of the garden where the noises were coming from. Virginia, Levi, and Ivy all spun around to look where Cedar was pointing. As they did, they saw something truly unbelievable. Yes, even more unbelievable than the fact that they were sitting in a fairy garden talking to 2 fairies. As they watched, a beautiful rose bush not too far from them began to change. All the color drained from each leaf and petal one by one. And in only a few seconds, every part of the once magnificent plant was left completely colorless. What was left behind was just a dull gray outline of the beautiful roses. When the noises stopped, the garden was completely silent. Virginia, Levi, and Ivy didn't know what to say. They could see, however, that Cedar and Blossom were very upset. Please tell us why that happened, said Levi. We can't let that happen to your whole garden. We have to help. Us? Help? What can we do? We're not magic, and this all seems very, very magical, said Ivy. Why haven't you told your parents yet, Cedar and Blossom? You might get in trouble for doing magic in the garden without them, but that would be worth it to save this wonderful place. We thought of that already. But we found out that once someone does what we've done, the entire fairy community freezes. Still a stone, except for the fairies that made it happen, so they can try and fix it. And once that happens, everything will be fine again. Or, started Cedar. Or we can't fix it and the entire garden completely loses all of its color, said Blossom as a tear ran down her face. It would be at that point that everyone else would unfreeze. We'd all get together and leave our home to find another. Blossom looked very upset and Cedar gave her a big hug. I'm okay. Just let me finish and tell you how the hurricane spell did all of this so we can tell you why we need your help, said Blossom, wiping her tears. Virginia, Levi, and Ivy nodded and were ready to listen. Cedar and Blossom then went on to tell their friends that once the hurricane spell started, the wind got out of control very quickly. I took out my kite and handed it to Cedar. I was ready to have him fly with it through the garden until it caught the wind. But we didn't even get that far before the kite handle I was holding was taken right out of my hand by a huge gust of wind, explained Blossom. I turned around and saw Blossom waving at me to come back, and that's when I noticed the wind was getting too strong for me to fly in, said Cedar. I was scared and dropped the kite and flew my hardest to get back to Blossom. Once Cedar reached his sister, they hid under the sturdiest, strongest thing they could find in the garden. It was a table made of stone with a giant book resting on top of it. It was opened up to the most stunning picture of their fairy garden and played the most important role of their entire fairy community. It was where all their fairy magic came from, and because of that, what happened next was the reason Virginia, Levi, and Ivy were there. So we sat under the table and we waited for the spell to run out, said Cedar. Since we're so young and our magic is fairly new, our spells only last about 10 minutes. We thought we'd just wait 10 minutes and go back to playing after the hurricane was over. No more spells this time, started Blossom. But then something terrible happened, added Cedar as he was pointed to the table they had been sitting under. As we waited, we heard something rumbling above our heads. We didn't think the winds were powerful enough to do this, but then all of a sudden we saw it. Saw what? What did you see? Called out Levi. The picture of our fairy garden as it swirled through the air, said Cedar. It had been torn out of the giant book, and as the last hurricane wind blew, it was whipped into the sky and flew all the way to your neighborhood garden. Is that all? A page ripped out of your book? Asked Ivy. That's what's making your garden lose all of its color? Yes, said Blossom as they all walked over to the giant book sitting on the table. She went on to tell Virginia, Levi, and Ivy that the book they were all looking at was the most magical thing in the whole garden. Each fairy garden in the world has one of these books. It's where all the gardens get their magic from, explained Cedar. Each fairy garden picture is filled with magic from all the fairies that have come before. It's the thing that keeps the garden growing, said Blossom. Well, I have great news. Your picture is right here, said Virginia, holding up the picture that she had found in her neighborhood garden. That's great, but having the picture in the garden won't help. The picture's magic only works if it's in the book, said Blossom. The hurricane winds tore the picture out because the book was open when we did our spell. The only way to get us to stop from losing the garden forever is to put the picture back in the book so it can get its magic back. The picture's magic is fueled from being joined together in the book with all the other fairy gardens in the world, added Cedar. That's why we need your help, said Cedar. We could see where the picture landed once the spell was over, and when we did, we saw Virginia. We could tell instantly she loved gardens, and we used another spell to transport all of you here. Just give us a little tape, and we'll get that picture right back in the book, smiled Ivy. Well, it's not that easy, said Blossom. The thing we need your help with is opening the book. The hurricane wind jammed the cover shut, and it's so heavy we can't budge it to open it back up. We thought 3 big, strong humans could do it without a problem. We need to get it open and the picture back inside very soon, added Cedar. Then, as Virginia, Levi, and Ivy were listening to this unbelievable tale, they heard some rumbling sounds from before and after a pop. The color then drained from several plants, vines, moss, leaves that were covering the garden. We need to hurry, said Blossom. We can't lose our garden. We can't lose our home. We will definitely help you, said Virginia. Yeah, no problem, said Levi. I'll have that book opened all by myself in just 1 second. Levi very confidently walked over to the table, grabbed the cover of the book with one hand, and gave it a quick flick of the wrist, thinking that the cover would just pop open easily. But he was wrong. Wow, that is a little heavier than I thought, said Levi as he grabbed the cover with both hands and pulled with all his might. But nothing happened. Why is it so heavy? Asked Levi. We were told it's to help protect the book so the pages can't be taken out, said Cedar, as Levi kept trying to open the cover. I think a little teamwork might help, said Blossom as she nudged Levi to ask Ivy and Virginia for help. I think you're right, giggled Levi as he motioned for his sister and their friend to come over and lend a hand. As the 3 friends tried with all their might, the rumbling and zapping noise could be heard all over the garden. Little by little, the garden was quickly turning gray. Cedar and Blossom were getting nervous. Oh no, the garden is losing its color faster now, exclaimed Blossom. You need to try harder, Caesar called out to Levi, Ivy, and Virginia. Please. We need more help, said Levi. What we need is a little magic, said Virginia. Magic? But that's what got Cedar and Blossom into the situation in the first place, replied Ivy. I think what we may need is just another little bit of help. Ivy then waved Cedar and Blossom over. We need your help, she called out. Each of you grab an edge of the book cover and flutter your wings as fast as you can. I think it may be just the extra bit of power we need to open up your fairy garden book. You got it, exclaimed Cedar and Blossom. Once the 2 little fairies were in place, Levi said that they would all lift together on the count of 3. The 3 friends and 2 fairies looked determined, but knew they had to work quickly. As they got ready to lift the garden around them, there was more gray than colorful. And as every second passed, more flowers, leaves, bushes, and vines were fading away. It started to happen faster and faster, and before another second went by, Levi called out, "Are we ready? 1, 2, 3, lift!" And as the 3 friends and 2 fairies pulled out the book cover with all their might, they felt it just start to lift, just a bit at first, and then a little bit more. The fading garden grew all around them as they worked, but instead of getting them down, they used it as fuel to keep going. They finally felt the book cover lifting enough that with one last burst of energy, they could now push it open. And they did. They all cheered and applauded at their job well done, but their task wasn't over yet. Virginia reached into her pocket and pulled out the picture she had found in her neighborhood garden back home, the picture that had brought them there. She held it up and saw that only one giant cedar tree in the center of the garden was still in full color, and without a moment to waste, she placed the picture back into the fairy garden book. Everyone cheered and let out a sigh of relief as the page fused back together with the others and the magic was restored to the garden. But in their excitement and celebration, they didn't see what was going on around them. That was until Virginia stopped to look. "Everyone," Virginia said in a whisper, "look, it's amazing." Then one by one, Levi, Ivy, Cedar, and Blossom looked all around them. What they saw left them speechless. In silence, they watched as the garden around them burst back into a colorful, magical fairy wonderland. "We did it!" cheered Ivy. "We can't thank you enough for all your help," said Cedar and Blossom, giving their 3 new friends a big fairy hug. Virginia, Levi, and Ivy ran around the garden as Cedar and Blossom flew, exploring every inch to make sure everything was back to normal. And it was. "I am so happy we were able to help, but I'm sorry to say I think it's time to go," Levi began. "As much as we'd like to stay longer, I know our parents will be wondering where we are." "We understand completely," said Cedar, "but I know we'll be able to see each other again soon." "Definitely. After seeing your neighborhood garden and how lovely it is, I think it would be a great place for a vacation someday," added Blossom. "We'd like that very much," said Virginia. "You and the rest of your neighborhood did a beautiful job creating something very special in that garden," said Blossom to Virginia. "Keep up the amazing work." "Thank you, Blossom," said Virginia, smiling at the little fairy before she, Levi, and Ivy said their goodbyes and waited to be sent back home. "Remember, no more magic in the garden without your parents around," joked Levi as they all waved goodbye to their new friends. "We promise," said Blossom. "We know we'll have a big conversation with them about all of this today. We definitely learned our lesson." Then it took only the blink of an eye before Virginia, Levi, and Ivy found themselves standing in the neighborhood garden once again, back home from an amazing adventure of a lifetime. "Seems kind of tough to just have a regular old play date now after something like that," giggled Ivy. "I know, but I'm sure we'll figure something amazing to do," said Levi. "We always do." The 3 friends all smiled and turned to leave the garden to head over to Levi and Ivy's house. That was until Virginia suddenly stopped and pointed to something growing in the middle of the garden. Something she had never seen before. "That flower!" exclaimed Virginia. "It's the flower I pointed out in Cedar and Blossom's garden, the most beautiful flower I'd ever seen. I can't believe it's here." "Wow, it looks amazing," exclaimed Ivy. "I wonder how you take care of a magical fairy garden flower like that." "Well, I guess it's a good thing that Cedar and Blossom want to visit here for vacation," said Levi. "We'll have to make sure to ask them when they get here." "Great idea," said Virginia. "But until then, I'll keep an eye on it." And with that, the 3 friends walked out of the garden, leaving it a little more full, a little bit more beautiful, and a lot more magical. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun Lively Lewis story with you.
This is an iHeart podcast.